Having a wedding during COVID isn't everyone's cup of tea, but there's an unexpected benefit to having an alternative wedding during COVID, and that is that you can save on wedding costs. And unless you're a billionaire, saving money is very appealing. Am I right? So today we are talking about how you can save money with an alternative wedding. Hi there, I'm Jamie Chang, your destination wedding planning guru and designer of joy at Mango Muse Events, the creator of Passport to Joy, the step-by-step online wedding planning course for couples, and the founder of Let's I Do This, intimate and virtual weddings in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I share real and honest and useful wedding planning tips, tricks, and advice you can use to help make planning your wedding easy and joyful so you can create a wedding you love. Because let's face it, wedding planning can be super stressful and sometimes downright painful, and nobody wants that. So we're bringing the joy back to wedding planning. Are you ready? All right, so let's do this. Now, we've been talking about the different types of weddings you can have during COVID. We've been talking about virtual weddings quite a bit. And by the way, if you haven't checked out our past videos on all of these types of weddings, you definitely should, and hit subscribe so you can access to all the new ones. Now, we have been talking about these different types of weddings, and obviously, with these alternative weddings, they're not for everyone, just like how destination weddings aren't for everyone. But, while they're different, they can be great. They can be super fun. They can be awesome. They can be wonderful. But, there are even more reasons besides, they can be great. There are so many reasons why they're a good choice and why they could be a good option. And you can learn about them in some of our other videos, which we'll share below. But, one of the biggest benefits to having an alternative wedding is really the cost savings. And when I say cost savings, I really mean cost savings in relation to what you would be normally paying if you were to have sort of a quote-unquote normal wedding. Now, cost savings really come into play with these alternative weddings because of sort of two main factors. And the first is really guest count. Because, in all of these alternative types of weddings, the guest count is small. And, because having, a smaller wedding right now is important given safety. And so while there are varying degrees of small, depending on the type of wedding we're talking about, a small wedding just in general means less guests. And less guests means you save money. Because guest count plays a huge factor in your wedding budget. Huge, right? It's why you see, in tips everywhere that, if you reduce your guest count, you can save money. It's true. And that's because, everything from chairs to tables to flowers to drinks are guest count oriented. And when you downsize those areas, you also downsize what you have to spend. And it can definitely save you money. Now, the second factor besides guest count is really the virtual aspect. Because, you could be doing a completely virtual wedding or a hybrid one with, say, 30 people or just a few people in person. Or you could be doing one that's only, part of your wedding is done in person. Like, say, for example, the ceremony. So whatever you're planning here, the virtual aspect, means that not only do you have less guests, which we talked about a little bit just before with guest count, but, all the things that you may have needed or required for an in-person wedding, you potentially don't anymore. So let's go through some examples here so you understand what I'm talking about here. So let's say we take your 10, like the 10-person band, the 8-person band, right? It's probably not something that makes a whole lot of sense anymore. Or say renting a wedding venue for 6+ hours. May not be applicable anymore. Or having a photographer for 8 hours may not make sense. Or say having a caterer and their entire team on site may no longer be necessary. Now, having some or all of your wedding be virtual really reduces a lot of your costs. And I want to point out, that these reasons why an alternative wedding can save you money really applies with or without COVID. What that means is, if you were to have one of these alternative weddings, say, in the past, like in 2019, or way in the future, like in 2025, right? It would save you money. So it's regardless of COVID. But what we're talking about is COVID. So let's now talk about the how, okay? And how do you save money with an alternative wedding? And with an alternative wedding specifically during COVID, because these are the times we're in now, right? And we have to take that into account too. Now, you might be thinking the answer to this question is just have one of these alternative weddings. Easy, Jamie. And the answer to that is yes, you are correct, and no, not totally. And let me explain why. So, having a wedding during COVID means you're having a wedding during COVID. And what that means is that even with a reduced guest count, even with a virtual aspect, there are some unexpected costs that come with a wedding during COVID. Because COVID-related items or procedures or layouts or staffing or needs are needed in order to keep your wedding safe, in order to have a safe wedding. And so this is what I'm talking about if you're a little confused right now, okay? So I'm talking about things like PPE, things like acrylic, barriers and shields, right? I'm talking about multiple smaller tables as opposed to less bigger tables. I'm talking about additional staff, perhaps, to help with sanitation or prevent lines. There's increased space that's needed in order to space everything out. There's disposable items. There's, hand sanitizer and sanitation items, etc., etc. So all these, COVID-related elements and items add to your costs. Even though you might be reducing costs because you're saving in other areas, like the fact that you have less guests, there are still COVID-related costs that you're going to have to be sort of adding into the budget. By the way, I recently wrote a blog post all about this and about the types of costs that you can expect. You can find that link below so you can get a little more information on that. But let's get back to really the question and the answer of today, which is yes, you can save money. You can definitely save money with an alternative wedding during COVID. But, and here is the important but, it depends on the type of wedding that you have. Okay? So really what we're talking about here is it comes down to your reception. Because most of the unexpected sort of COVID-related costs you'd have to take into account or bring in or add to your budget really applies when we're talking about the in-person reception. If you think about it, right? Think food, drinks, dancing. There's, with all those pieces, right? There's a lot more to think about and to plan for. And so even, with a small wedding, the larger your guest count, the more COVID costs will come into play. So if you think about it, there are already a ton of logistics, right, that go into weddings. But the logistics for a wedding during COVID already increase, just given all the safety measures that are required. But with a reception, those just skyrocket because there's so much more to think about and plan for. So how can you save money with an alternative wedding? You need to choose an option without an in-person reception. Or you need to make sure that your in-person reception is tiny. And when I say tiny, I mean, 15, 10 or less guests total. Okay? So what are you looking at here? You might be asking yourself. We're looking at a virtual wedding. We're looking at an elopement. And an elopement can be more than just two people, by the way, which you can learn more about in our other videos. So we're talking about a virtual wedding, we're talking about elopement, we're talking about a pop-up wedding, we're talking about a micro wedding, and we're talking about a hybrid wedding. These are the types of events or the types of weddings that you can have in order to save money. And once again, you can learn more in our other video about these types of weddings. Because the great thing, there's not necessarily tons of positive things during these COVID times, but there really is a great thing about having an alternative wedding during COVID, and that is that you can save money. You really can. It's wonderful and really helpful, especially now depending on your situation. But just make sure you choose the right type of wedding to have. Otherwise, you might not end up saving a whole lot of money at all. Okay? Make sure you check out all the links we share below because it'll really provide you more info on all the topics we discussed today. Now, I want to wrap this video up with a question, and here's the question for you. What type of alternative wedding are you thinking about having? Let me know in a comment below. And if you enjoyed today's video, please like it, give us some thumbs up. You can check out our other videos for even more wedding planning tips, and please hit subscribe so you can get access to all the new ones. And if you're looking for help through the entire wedding planning process, including having access to a personal wedding advisor, check out Passport to Joy, my online course. You can find all the links below. Because you deserve to enjoy your engagement, no matter what your budget is, and even in the middle of a pandemic. Thanks so much for being here, and I will see you next time. Bye.